The second he looked at her and smiled like he already knew the answer, her stomach dropped. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was a test. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and how old are you? And let me ask you something honestly. If someone you were falling for started quietly testing your loyalty, would you even realize it? Or would karma step in before you could? You're right here with me now, sitting inside a small roadside cafe where the air smells like burnt coffee and second chances. Nobody around notices her. That's exactly how Celeste Rowan wants it. Early 60s, calm posture, ordinary coat, no jewelry worth a second glance. Nothing about her appearance suggests that she controls companies people drive past every day without knowing her name. Celeste didn't hide her wealth for fun. She hid it for survival. Years ago, love had turned into a negotiation. Smiles changed when numbers surfaced. Affection softened into expectation. When that chapter finally collapsed, it didn't just break her heart. It taught her a lesson she never forgot. If she ever opened herself again, it would be as a woman, not a prize. That decision led her here, and to him. His name was Franklin Moore, 73, retired city inspector, widowed long enough to stop explaining the pain. Franklin had a steady voice and eyes that didn't rush ahead of the moment. He listened without interrupting. He never asked what Celeste owned, only what she enjoyed. That alone made her stay longer than she planned. At first, everything felt refreshingly simple. Morning coffee, afternoon walks, evenings where silence didn't need to be filled. Celeste felt something soften inside her, something she had kept locked for years, and that scared her more than being alone ever had. Then the tone shifted. Franklin began talking about money. Not directly, but deliberately. About being cautious. About people who confused comfort with entitlement. About how wealth could quietly rot relationships if no one was paying attention. He said it casually, but his eyes always returned to her face afterward, watching. If you were sitting there, would you notice that pause? Celeste did, and it made her uneasy. What she didn't know was that Franklin wasn't speaking randomly. He had lived through the slow erosion of trust before. He had watched his late wife give endlessly until there was nothing left, all while being praised for her generosity. He promised himself never to walk blindly into that again. So he decided to test her. It started small. He insisted on paying for everything, even when she offered. He spoke about living within limits. Then one evening, he mentioned his car might not pass inspection. He laughed it off, but his eyes lingered, searching. Celeste felt it instantly, the unspoken question. She said nothing. Days later, the pressure increased. An unexpected medical charge, a delayed reimbursement. Always framed as stress, never a request. Franklin never asked for help, but he waited to see if she would offer it on her own. Inside, Celeste was fighting herself, because helping would be easy, because solving problems was what she had always done, because she liked him, and withholding support felt cruel. But she remembered the cost of stepping in too fast, too generously. She stayed still. Then came the envelope. Franklin placed it on the table between them one quiet evening, his hands steady, his expression unreadable. Inside were loan papers, blank, unsigned. He didn't ask her to read them. He didn't ask for money. He simply said he needed to understand the kind of future they were moving toward. Celeste stared at that envelope like it was a mirror reflecting every mistake she had ever made. This was the moment that decided everything. Help and risk becoming valuable for the wrong reason. Refuse, and possibly lose him forever. She pushed the envelope back gently and spoke from the deepest place she had. She told him she cared, but she believed love only worked when both people stood on their own. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't apologize. She told the truth. Franklin leaned back slowly. Then he said something that made her heart stop. He smiled, not with warmth or anger, but with quiet revelation, and said, "Then I think it's time I stopped testing you, because karma already answered for me." Franklin's words hung between them, heavier than the envelope ever was. Celeste felt her pulse in her ears, that quiet roar that comes right before a truth changes shape. He reached into his jacket, slow enough that she tensed for a second, then pulled out a folded document and placed it beside the loan papers. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a contract. It was a bank statement, old and creased, numbers circled in pen. He exhaled and finally looked away. He admitted he hadn't been honest, not because he needed her money, but because he needed certainty. He told her he had enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He told her he had watched love turn poisonous when generosity replaced partnership. He said he was afraid of being wanted for what he could provide, afraid of repeating a mistake that once cost him everything. And yes, he said, he tested her. Celeste didn't speak right away. She stared at the table, then at her hands, then back at his face. The irony cut deep. Two people hiding, two people measuring silence, both terrified of the same thing. If you were sitting there, would you feel angry or would you feel relief? She told him the truth she had never planned to say out loud. She told him she wasn't just comfortable. She told him she owned more than she needed and had learned the hard way that money could buy access, not love. She said she had tested him too, by shrinking her life and watching who stayed. Her voice shook once, then steadied. She wasn't confessing to impress him. She was confessing because the masks had finally become heavier than the risk. Franklin listened without interrupting. No calculations, no sudden excitement, just a long silence where the pieces finally fit. Then he did something Celeste hadn't seen in years. He apologized without defending himself. He said testing her had been wrong, even if it came from fear. He said he didn't want to win a game he never should have started. For a moment, Celeste wondered if this was where they stood up and walked away in opposite directions, both wiser and lonelier. But karma doesn't always arrive like punishment. Sometimes it arrives like a mirror. The very next week, the universe stepped in. A former acquaintance of Franklin's, someone he had once loaned money to out of kindness, showed up unannounced, loud and demanding, insisting on more help. The scene was uncomfortable and revealing. Celeste watched from a distance as Franklin stood his ground, calm but firm, refusing to be manipulated again. When the man finally left in a huff, muttering insults, Franklin looked shaken but resolute. Later that night, Franklin admitted something quietly. If Celeste had offered money earlier, he might never have learned that lesson. He might have slipped back into old patterns. Her refusal, her restraint, had forced him to confront his own boundaries. Karma had hit fast, not with loss, but with clarity. Celeste felt something loosen in her chest. Not triumph, not validation, understanding. They didn't rush into anything after that. No grand gestures, no dramatic promises. They took walks where honesty replaced performance. They talked about fears without disguising them as jokes. They learned where the lines were and respected them. And slowly, something stronger than attraction formed. Trust that didn't depend on secrecy. Months later, Celeste invited Franklin to her home. Not the small rental he knew, but the place she had kept separate from the world. When he saw it, truly saw it, he didn't change. He didn't brag. He didn't ask for anything. He asked if she was happy there. That was the moment she knew the tests were finally over. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own life, ask yourself something honestly. Have you ever tested someone because you were afraid to be seen? And have you ever mistaken protection for honesty? Love doesn't grow in traps. It grows where truth is allowed to stand without armor. Celeste and Franklin didn't end up perfect. They ended up real. Two people who stopped hiding, stopped measuring, and let karma do what it does best, reveal. If this story made you feel something, take a second to like the video. Share it with someone who believes love after a certain age is impossible. And tell me in the comments what you learned from this story. Subscribe if you want more stories that remind us it's never too late to choose honesty over fear.